When I think about the environmental changes that happen in these swings from high resonance to low resonance that we see on the planet throughout the history of the lithosphere, we have records of this through the magnetic field changes recorded in the stone and the lava. And what we see basically is a picture of changing environmental conditions that's quite like what the Nahuatl cultures of North America are telling us in their cosmologies. So the Hopi, for example, as well as the Maya and the other Pima, Zuni, all these tribes that are related to the same traditions, provide, the Hopi specifically provide us with three epochs or three cycles that the Earth has been through in its incarnations. Let's say, or three resonant states of the planet. And they talk about this as a series of different worlds. And the first world was, they described in purple light, and the North Pole faced the sun itself. And that's fascinating because purple, of course, is one of the, or ultraviolet certainly is one of the frequencies of light most prominent in water vapor, which surrounds our planet. And then they're ending that were in the yellow light of the sun, where the North Pole was perpendicular to the plane of the ecliptic, and as well off in some of those worlds were no longer perpendicular. So there were several different worlds that had the yellow sun. And then they conclude that we are now approaching the third phase of creation, which involves an atmosphere that has red light. And I think the acoustic changes as well as the luminal changes in our atmosphere are what dictate these effects of high to low resonance, which really create chromosomal changes. And I think the fact that we have far fewer chromosomes than the great ape species really shows us that something special is going on, or something quite unusual is going on with the human chromosome.
Thank you, Alex. A drop of from 8 hertz roughly to 1.45 hertz is a large drop in the Schumann resonance. Talking about the three resonances in the past that you were just describing, interestingly, an expanding Earth planet with a longer diameter matches why the Schumann resonance may drop, as frequency is inversely related to the Earth's diameter. What do you think of the expanding Earth theory, and can you elaborate on the consequences of a change in resonance?
Yeah, I've actually thought about that theory a lot, and my conclusion is that it may be happening, and that may be an accurate picture that the Earth is expanding, but I think perhaps on a longer time scale that I'm speaking of, because the changes I'm referring to, the Hopi at least speak of the red dawn, that this change will happen overnight and will be permanent from that morning on for thousands of years. So when I look at the resonance changes in the planet, first of all, we have to understand what the Schumann resonance are composed of, because that term resonance is given because it's not just a single frequency. It's a resonance or a set of harmonics and subharmonics from a frequency that's the most loud and prominent, and that's the one that's mostly mentioned by people, which is fluctuating around 8 hertz, and goes down to about 7.2, 7.3 hertz, and swings higher as well. So that's actually just one of the base frequencies, and the whole Schumann resonances is a set that's over 30 frequencies simultaneously recorded all the time, and they fluctuate in their levels, but more or less they correspond to frequency steps that are separated by about 5.9 hertz. So if we look at these, a sequence of these steps, of course they're changing all the time, they're fluctuating, but we might have a set of frequencies that if you go below 7.3 hertz, you get to the 1.45 hertz range if you subtract the 5.9 hertz. So that's the human heartbeat range, which is one of the resonant frequencies of the planet, but is actually a subharmonic of the dominant frequency of the planet. So my thinking is that the changes will not necessarily involve the Earth's diameter shifting drastically, but in fact the fundamental frequency of the Schumann frequencies will start to be reflected in a deeper 1.4 hertz range rather than the 7 to 8 hertz range that's present now. So it's going to be very interesting to watch and see what happens and try to record these changes if our instruments are able to do so.
And how would it affect people personally, do you think? What would be the effects would be then?
Well, the Hopi, I think, give us very clear analysis of what the ancient Atlantean cultural beliefs were and what the prophecies refer to in these changes as regards human experience. They tell us that the messages will be sent, the Hopi specifically tell us in their prophecies that messages will be received and the twins will allow a change to occur in each and every form of life. That this change will be determined by many factors, and that there will be, they also speak of things that will be felt but not seen. And of course, this sounds very strange, but if you understand the acoustic changes as relating to low-frequency sound hotspots, as I've been able to show through my research, then it makes sense that you can find places on the planet where, as they've told us, certain temples, certain lifestyles are conducive to activation and spiritual achievement. And in fact, the temples of these ancient cultures, for example, the kivas of the Hopi and these mud houses, were designed specifically to keep the earth pulse moving through the human bodies that were in these places, through barefoot and through natural skin moccasins and things like that. So the ancient knowledge corresponds to what we're measuring now, because we have measurements from solar flare activity. As recently on my website I pointed out, I think a week and a half ago, there was a solar flare event that was directly recorded by instruments and that measured both the magnetic shock wave of the CME arriving at Earth, the mass ejection, coronal mass ejection, but they also recorded the ground electrical surges in the electrical ground state. So that right there corresponds to ancient knowledge showing us that the equipment that is now, for example, railroad tracks, large pipelines that are crisscrossing the ground are in fact not able to handle the high-intensity electrical surges that are occurring. And of course, I've tracked on my website stories that show this as a fact. And in Nairobi recently, in Kenya, there was a massive petroleum pipeline blast. And then I believe it was reported yesterday that in Subiang Jaya, which is just south in Kuala Lumpur, these explosions, they had a gas main explosion, methane. So these explosions are going to continue to happen, and throughout my work with the website, I'm trying to link the events that show that these are in fact related to solar activities. And so the human changes on our scale have to do with lifestyle changes so that we can use ancient knowledge to be able to receive these energies appropriately. And the ancient traditions give us those, building techniques and temple styles all over the world we see where there's an ancient way to do things that we're not adhering to today, and I think is a key for future survival and to thrive in these changes.
Thank you, Alex. Talking about the humans navigating these changes and lifestyle changes and techniques, you talk about silver nanoparticles in the 1 to 10 nanometer range inhibiting virus's ability to survive in the human body. Ancient texts talk about the philosopher's stone coming in two forms, the white stone that transmutes any metal into silver and the red stone that transmutes any metal into gold. It seems gold and silver is far more important than what we have been led to believe and far more valuable than just a method of currency. Can you elaborate from your research what other uses these metals, gold and silver, have in special forms? And do you believe, as per Jay Widener's research, that there is an elixir of life that can be brewed into water and to form and provide the person that ingests it eternal life?
I do, and I read extensively in my books and a little bit on my website about the waters that are found in the spring, the sacred springs here in the mountain of Lamana, where I'm developing an Ayurvedic center right now. And these waters certainly have been replicated in some of their aspects in laboratories around the world. And in fact, in North America, I myself was making gold and silver colloids with the same very tiny particle size of about 10 nanometers or smaller, that's able to pass through the aquaporons of the cells of the body. So this water we have here now, we're going to be adding more gold, enriching the water with more gold and silver. And in fact, we're looking towards developing applications with chocolate and things like that. So there are many ways that ancient people were enriching their foods, and of course manna bread is one I speak about in my books, and has in fact been mentioned in some extraterrestrial contacts, interestingly enough. The key to these particles that really connects with the Kundalini tradition of Sanskrit cultures, I believe, has to do with their effect, which has been measured scientifically as what's called electroluminescence, which refers to the property of these particles in these sizes that allow them to convert an electrical current passing through them into pulses of light that are determined by, of course, the current itself that's put through. But the silver particles produce a blue light, whereas the gold nanoparticles produce a red light, and different frequencies can be attained by tuning the particle size. So these fascinating characteristics of what have been spoken about, I believe, in ancient texts as well as extraterrestrial contacts are now something we can use in the home today. And I've been using simple 9-volt batteries to produce these colloids and use them effectively for healthcare for myself, my family, and those I care about. So there's a lot of information about how those things have been used publicly. But what I end up doing is encouraging people to make colloidal baths that they put electrodes into and receive a 9-volt battery pulse through their, for example, a foot bath while they're drinking these colloids. And I think that's the best, the easiest and most effective way of allowing energy from the earth to pulse through your body when you are, grounding directly with the earth is obviously the best way, but certainly 9-volt battery is a low enough current, but effective in decreasing the increasing the permeability of the cell walls so that you're able to flush through a process called electroporation, flush all of the toxins and increase the cellular metabolism during the exposure to electrical currents. So there's a lot of, effects from the electricity which are invisible, and the nanoparticles themselves are invisible. But I've developed a way where you can actually, using a silver concentrate, see the electroluminescence of the silver particles and the flashing of those particles underwater with your eyelids even closed. So the intensity of light is not so great that you can see it. We're not speaking about people glowing because of this, but they certainly are in an invisible way. And that, for me, is really unlocking the key to this ancient adage of illumination, and that literal illumination within the body is what these sacred colloids produce, and that's what I'm interested in producing for healing effects in people. So here in Lamana, we're developing an Ayurvedic center for that, and we're going to encourage, freely give this information around the world and encourage other groups to use this to be able to synchronize and align themselves with the changes coming through the enhanced ground currents that are going to be, flashing through our planet and are continually as solar activity increases.
Yes, I agree with you. And there's obviously two ways. I think your way is, in terms of increasing the luminescence of your body is most important. But I've also heard Jeff Renz talk about, putting in a magnetic field around you when he's, a certain bed that you can sleep in where, it can change it can minimize the magnetic field effects of the earth so that you can get a negative effect or something. So I do agree. Speaking of energy, Alex, in your book, Light Water, you state all men are made of earth, air, water and fire. But in their hearts and in their semen, each man has its own coatl, his own serpent, the energy of Tonatua, the power of the sun itself. This was very striking to me because in many ancient cultures, the reproductive organs have often been worshipped and deified. Semen has the power to create life. Priests practice an act of celibacy to be closer to God. Satanic rituals often involve sexual practices to commune with other dimensions and entities. Yang Qi energy is used or is said to be developed in the sexual organs and through meditation can be stored in the Dantian. In your research, what do you think is the importance of the sexual organs and the semen, apart from the traditional use of procreation? And can you share with us other ways we individually can use our coatl, our serpent, our energy from our eternal sun?